I always believed that when you love someone, you show it. Not just with words, but with actions. Small things, big things, it all mattered. That's why, on our 10th anniversary, I bought Deborah an expensive necklace. A delicate chain with a small, diamond-studded pendant. Something elegant, something that suited her, something that she didn't deserve. At the time, I still thought I was a good husband. That I was doing the right thing. But now? Looking back, I see the cracks, the way she barely smiled when I gave it to her. The way she touched it absent-mindedly, like it didn't mean much. The way she kissed my cheek, not my lips, and said, "Thank you, Franklin. It's beautiful." Like I was just some guy giving her a gift, not her husband, not the man she was supposed to love. And here's the worst part, the necklace wasn't just a necklace. It had a hidden GPS tracker inside, and in just a few days, that little device would lead me straight to the truth, straight to her lover. I didn't put the GPS tracker in the necklace because I knew she was cheating. I put it there because I suspected. And suspicion? It eats at you. Deborah had been acting differently for months. At first, it was little things. She became distant, but not in an obvious way. She still kissed me goodbye, still asked about my day. But her eyes weren't in it. She started dressing nicer even on the days she wasn't going anywhere. Her phone? Glued to her hand. She used to leave it on the kitchen counter, unlocked. Now, it was always with her, always face down, and if it buzzed while we were together, she ignored it, like she didn't even see the notification, but I did. And the worst part? Sex changed, not in the way most men worry about. Not in a she's not interested anymore kind of way. The opposite, she became more interested. But in a way that felt off, like she was doing it out of guilt. Like she was trying to keep me distracted. I wasn't stupid. I knew something wasn't right, and if she was doing what I thought she was doing, that necklace would tell me exactly where to find her, exactly where she was sneaking off to, and soon enough, it did. I told myself I wasn't going to check the tracker right away. That I'd wait, give her time, see if I was wrong, but deep down, I already knew I wasn't. 2 days after I gave Deborah the necklace, she started leaving the house more. Errands. Lunch with friends. Spa appointments. At first, I didn't say anything. I just watched. Waited. Then, on a Wednesday afternoon, she told me she was meeting her sister for lunch. A normal excuse. Nothing out of the ordinary. But something about the way she said it felt rehearsed. I smiled. That's nice. Where are you two going? She hesitated just for a second, then she said, that Italian place on 5th. And that was her mistake, because Deborah hated that place. She always complained about the food being too heavy, the service being too slow. And yet, now, all of a sudden, that's where she and her sister were going. She was lying. I watched her walk out the door, all dolled up, a little too much perfume. I waited exactly 5 minutes, then, I pulled out my phone, opened the GPS tracking app, and checked her location, and guess what? She wasn't on 5th Street, she was on the other side of town, and she wasn't at a restaurant. She was at a house. A house I had never seen before. A house that wasn't ours. I gripped my phone tighter, my pulse thudding in my ears. I could have ignored it. Could have pretended I didn't see, but I was done pretending. I had to know. So I grabbed my keys, got in my car, and drove toward the truth. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The little blinking dot on my phone screen wasn't moving. Deborah was there. At that house. Sitting inside somewhere with someone, and she had no idea that I was watching. The drive felt endless, every red light stretching longer than usual, every car in front of me too slow. My heart was pounding in my ears, my jaw clenched so tightly it ached, because this wasn't just a suspicion anymore. This was real. She had looked me in the eye this morning. Kissed me on the cheek. Told me she was having lunch with her sister, and now, she was with him. The street was quiet when I pulled up. The house wasn't anything special. 2-story, brick, an expensive-looking car parked in the driveway. Not hers. Not ours, his. I parked a few houses down, keeping my hands steady, my breathing even. I wasn't going to barge in like some jealous fool. I wanted to see it for myself that I needed proof. So I waited, and then, I saw her, the front door opened, and there she was. Deborah, not rushing. Not sneaking. Comfortable, like she had been there before, she stepped onto the porch, smiling, laughing, her hair a little too perfect, her dress hugging her body in a way that wasn't for me, and then he appeared, tall. Well dressed. Too comfortable with my wife that he placed a hand on her lower back, leaned in, whispered something in her ear, she giggled. Giggled. Then, without hesitation, she turned her face toward him and kissed him, not the way she kissed me, not a peck, not a quick, hesitant brush of lips. A real kiss, the kind that says this is more than just sex, the kind that says this is real. My hands trembled because this wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a drunken regret or a one-time lapse in judgment, this was planned. Thought out. Repeated, this was my wife, choosing someone else, and in that moment, something inside me snapped. I stepped out of the car, my feet hitting the pavement hard, not rushing. Not yelling, just walking toward the truth. They didn't see me at first. Too wrapped up in each other. Too lost in their little fantasy where I didn't exist. But then, Deborah turned her head, her eyes flickered toward the street, and she saw me, her body froze. Her breath hitched. Her face drained of color so fast it was like she had seen a ghost, because in her mind, I wasn't supposed to be here. I was supposed to be at work. I was supposed to be blind. I was supposed to be the fool she could keep lying to. But now, she was caught, and the fear in her eyes told me she knew it. Her mouth opened. No sound came out. She took a step back, away from him, like suddenly, if she moved far enough, she could erase what I just saw. Franklin, she finally breathed. I can explain. I smiled, not a real one. Not the kind I used to give her. A cold one. The kind that says, I already know, go ahead, I said, my voice calm. Controlled. Dangerous, explain. Her lips parted again, eyes darting between me and him, her mind was racing. Calculating because Deborah wasn't sorry, she wasn't devastated, she was just trying to figure out how to lie her way out of this, but not this time, I was done believing her, and now, she had to face the truth. Deborah's mouth opened, then closed, her eyes flicking between me and him. The gears in her head were turning, searching for the right lie, because that's what this was to her, a puzzle. A game where she had to come up with the right words, the perfect excuse, something just believable enough to make me question what I had seen with my own eyes. I wasn't giving her that chance. Explain, I said again, my voice calm. Too calm, she swallowed, her hand gripping the railing on the porch. She was still standing next to him, though she had put a few inches of space between them now. Like that would make me forget that I just watched her kiss him. Franklin, she started, her voice shaking, this isn't what it looks like. I let out a slow breath, shaking my head. The classic line. I took a step forward, watching as she stepped back. Then what is it, Deborah? I asked. Go on. Tell me. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed hard. She hesitated, her hands clenching at her sides. Searching for the right story. I was just visiting a friend. I tilted my head. A friend? She nodded quickly. Yes. That's all. I looked at him. Do you kiss all your friends like that? I asked, raising an eyebrow. He shifted uncomfortably, his face paling. But Deborah? She didn't even blink, she sucked in a breath, straightened her shoulders, and doubled down. It wasn't a kiss, she said firmly. It wasn't what you think. He was just leaning in to say something. That's all. I let out a laugh, cold. Bitter, because even now, she was lying to my face, even with her lips still red from another man's kiss, she was still trying to gaslight me. Unbelievable. I turned my attention to him. You got a name? I asked. He hesitated. Deborah quickly spoke before he could. Franklin, you don't need to, I wasn't asking you. My eyes snapped back to him. I asked him. The guy cleared his throat. Eric. I smiled. Eric. I took another step forward. So, Eric. My wife says this isn't what it looks like. He swallowed hard. He glanced at Deborah, then back at me. He didn't know what to say, because he wasn't expecting this, that he thought I was some clueless idiot. Some husband who would never find out, never suspect, never see the truth, and now, he was caught in her web of lies. Tell me, Eric, I continued, voice smooth, steady. Is that what you were thinking when you had her in your arms? His face twisted. Franklin, Deborah's voice was sharper now. Defensive. You're making this into something it's not. Now we were getting somewhere, because the second Deborah couldn't lie her way out of something, she shifted the blame that I was the problem, not her, not the man she was sneaking around with. I exhaled through my nose, shaking my head. I watched you, Deborah, I said, my voice quieter now. I watched you lie to my face this morning. You looked me in the eyes, told me you were having lunch with your sister. But you weren't. She crossed her arms. I changed my plans. Right, I said, nodding. And I'm sure that kiss was part of the plan too? Her lips parted, caught, but Deborah never admitted when she was caught, she just kept lying. Franklin, she said, stepping forward, her tone softer now. Fake. Calculated. You're overreacting. I tilted my head. Am I? She placed a hand on my arm, the same hand that had been touching him minutes ago. I yanked my arm away, her expression flickered anger, for just a second, because I wasn't supposed to react like that. I was supposed to doubt myself, I was supposed to believe her, I was supposed to fall for it. Not this time, not anymore. I took another step back, exhaling sharply. Deborah, I said, keeping my voice even. Tell me the truth. Right now. No more lies. Her jaw tightened, she stared at me, and then, after a long pause, she said the worst thing she could have said. The truth, she whispered, tilting her head. Then, slowly, she smirked. The truth is, she glanced at Eric, then back at me, her expression cold. I had options. Options, like I was just one of many, like I was just one of her choices. My whole body stiffened, my breathing slowing. Calm. Too calm. Deborah thought she had one, but what she didn't know, I was just getting started. I had options. The words rang in my ears, sharp and cold. Not I made a mistake, not I didn't mean to hurt you, not even it's not what it looks like. No, she looked me dead in the eyes, smirked, and chose to say that, like she was proud. Like she had never really cared whether she got caught or not, like I was supposed to accept that. Deborah had always been good at twisting things. She had a way of making me feel like I was the one who needed to prove something. Like I had to work harder, be better, make her want me, and for years, I fell for it. But now, I saw her for what she really was. A woman who had never respected me. A woman who had always thought she deserved more. A woman who, even after getting caught in another man's arms, still had the nerve to smirk in my face. Not this time. I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. Eric shifted uncomfortably beside her, his jaw tight, hands in his pockets. I could tell he wasn't feeling so confident anymore, because he didn't know the woman he had been sneaking around with, but I did. Deborah wasn't the type to accept blame. She wasn't the type to cry and apologize and beg for forgiveness. She was the type to pretend she was the victim, the type to gaslight, the type to turn this all around and somehow make it my fault that I had walked into this thinking I would get some fake tears. Some half-hearted excuse, but instead, I got the truth, and I was done playing her game. I took a slow step back, crossing my arms. So that's it, then? My voice was calm. Too calm. Deborah frowned slightly, shifting her weight. She had expected anger. Screaming. Some big dramatic fight. She didn't expect this. What do you mean? She asked carefully. I let out a small, bitter chuckle. I mean, you got what you wanted, right? Your options. Your excitement. Your little secret life. I gestured toward Eric. I assume he's the best one? Eric opened his mouth, but Deborah shot him a look. She didn't want him talking. I smiled. Huh. Guess not. Her jaw clenched. Franklin, you're twisting this. There it was, the deflection, the moment where she would try to make me feel like I was overreacting. like I was the one ruining things. I tilted my head. Am I? She inhaled sharply. You weren't supposed to see this, she snapped. That I let the words hang between us. That I wasn't supposed to see this. She wasn't sorry she did it, she was sorry she got caught. Eric cleared his throat awkwardly. Look, man, I don't want to be involved in this. I smirked, shaking my head. Oh, but you already are, Eric. His face paled slightly. I turned my attention back to Deborah. So, tell me, I said slowly. What happens now? Do you pick one of your options? Do you run off with him? Eric stiffened. Wait, Deborah didn't answer. Her silence told me everything. She wasn't sure, she thought she had all the control, and yet, right now, standing between me and Eric, she looked like a woman who had no idea what to do next, because, for once, she wasn't in control. I nodded slowly, right. I turned on my heel, walking toward my car. Deborah's breath hitched. Where are you going? She called after me. I paused, looking at her over my shoulder. She looked worried now, not guilty. Not remorseful, worried because I wasn't doing what she expected. She thought I would fight for her, she thought I would break down, she thought she still had power over me, but she didn't, and she never would again. I smiled, a real one this time. Nowhere, I said. I'm just done standing here wasting my time. Her mouth opened. Franklin, but I was already getting into my car, already leaving her behind, and this time, she was the one watching me walk away. I pulled the car door shut, but I didn't drive away right away. I just sat there, hands resting on the wheel, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. Deborah was still standing in the driveway. Still watching. Still waiting. She wasn't chasing after me. Not yet, because she still thought she could fix this, not by apologizing. Not by telling the truth. By manipulating her way out of it. And I wasn't playing that game anymore. She took a slow step forward, like she was deciding whether or not to come closer. Franklin, she called. Her voice was softer now. Sweeter. Let's just talk. I tilted my head slightly, meeting her eyes through the glass. Talk? Now she wanted to talk. I smiled to myself. Because I knew exactly what she was doing. For years, Deborah had been a master of control. If she ever felt like she was losing, she knew how to pull someone back in. She knew how to become exactly what they needed in the moment. Right now, she needed to sound reasonable, because if I believed she was being reasonable, I might doubt my own reaction. I might start thinking, maybe I overreacted. Maybe this isn't as bad as I thought, and if she got me to believe that, then she'd win. Again. I rolled down the window slightly, resting my arm against the door. Talk? I repeated, my voice calm. She nodded quickly. Yes. Just come inside for a second. Inside, the house where she had been kissing another man, the house where she had laughed in his arms. She actually thought I would walk inside like some fool, sit on their couch, and listen to her twist the truth into something that didn't sound so bad. I smirked, no thanks. Her lips parted slightly, eyes widening for just a second. She hadn't expected that answer. She had expected me to argue, because arguments meant there was still something left to save, but I wasn't arguing. I was just done. Deborah took another step forward, her confidence starting to shake. Franklin, please, she said, her voice lower now. Just 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. I let out a slow breath, tilting my head. 5 minutes? She nodded. To do what, Deborah? I asked, my voice steady. To lie to me some more? Her face twisted. That hit her. For the first time tonight, she looked genuinely nervous. I watched her closely. Because this was the moment. This was when she had to make a decision. Would she finally tell the truth? Would she finally admit what she had done? Would she take responsibility for the fact that she had destroyed our marriage with her own choices? I saw her hesitate for just a moment. I thought, maybe she would finally say the words that needed to be said, but then, she did what she always did. She chose herself, she chose the lie. I wasn't going to sleep with him, she blurted. It wasn't Franklin, it wasn't serious. I let out a short laugh. There it was, not an apology, not remorse, just damage control. Not serious? I repeated. So what, Deborah? You just throw your arms around men and kiss them for fun? She hesitated for half a second, and that was all I needed because it told me everything. That I nodded slowly. Right. Her face fell. She knew she had lost me. Franklin, she whispered, stepping forward. Please. I love you. I studied her. She wasn't crying, she wasn't shaking, she wasn't breaking down in regret, because she didn't love me. She loved what I gave her. She loved the security, the stability, the life I had built for her. But me, I had just been her best option until she started looking for a better one. I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. Deborah, I said, voice quiet. You had a choice. She swallowed. And tonight? I took a deep breath. You made it. She flinched, stepping back slightly, like my words had actually hit her harder than she expected. I put the car in drive, and as I pulled away, I saw the fear in her eyes, not because she was afraid of losing me but because for the first time, she wasn't the one leaving. This time, I was walking away first. The road stretched ahead of me, but I wasn't looking at it. Not my eyes flicked to the rearview mirror one last time. Deborah was still standing in that driveway, still watching, still waiting, but she wasn't chasing after me. Not yet, because this wasn't the way she had planned for this to go. She had expected me to fight for her. To argue. To get angry enough to stay. Instead, I had given her nothing, and that scared her more than anything else. I gripped the wheel, taking a deep breath. My hands were steady. My pulse was steady, because for the first time in a long time I wasn't afraid of losing her. I was relieved. 15 minutes later, my phone rang. I didn't even have to check the screen. I knew it was her. I let it ring, then, a text. Deborah, Franklin, please. Just talk to me. I let out a slow breath, staring at the message. It was already starting. The damage control. She wasn't sorry for what she did, she was sorry she had been caught. I locked my phone and tossed it onto the passenger seat. She wasn't worth a response. By the time I reached my house, my phone had buzzed 3 more times. Deborah, please, just answer me. Deborah, we can talk about this. Deborah, don't do this, Franklin. I stared at the last message, my jaw tightening. Don't do this, like I was the one making a mistake. Like this was my fault. I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. She still didn't get it, she still thought she could spin this. That was the problem with women like Deborah. They didn't think the rules applied to them. They thought they could do whatever they wanted, lie, cheat, manipulate and still win. But not this time. This time, she had lost and she had no one to blame but herself. I stepped inside my house, because after today, it wouldn't be ours anymore. Deborah had made her choice. Now, it was time for me to make mine. I grabbed a bag from the closet, my mind clearer than it had been in years. I wasn't staying, not in this house. Not in this broken marriage. I had wasted enough time. I was finally ready to take back my life, and this time, she wasn't coming with me. The house was quiet. Too quiet. It had always felt cold, even when Deborah was here. Even when we were supposed to be happy. I just hadn't noticed before. Now, I saw it for what it was. A house where only one of us had ever truly been present. I set the bag on the bed and started packing. Not in a rush. Not in anger. Just done everything that mattered. My clothes, my documents, the things that actually belonged to me. Everything else? She could keep it. She could keep the furniture we picked out together, the expensive dishes she insisted on having but never used, the framed photos of a marriage that only ever looked happy from the outside. None of it meant anything anymore. I zipped up the bag, exhaled slowly, and took one last look around the room. This wasn't my home anymore, and, deep down, I wasn't sure if it ever had been. My phone buzzed again. I ignored it. It buzzed again. And again. Finally, I glanced at the screen. Deborah, Franklin, please. Let's talk. Deborah, you can't just leave like this. Deborah, it was a mistake. You know I love you. I let out a short laugh. A mistake, that was what she called it, like she had accidentally fallen into another man's arms. Like she had tripped into his bed, like she hadn't spent months lying to my face, sneaking around, pretending to be my wife while living a whole other life behind my back. She wasn't sorry, she just didn't like that I was the one walking away. I tapped the screen, hovered over the message, then blocked her number. No more calls. No more texts. No more lies. I walked to the kitchen, grabbed my car keys, and headed for the door. As I reached for the handle, my phone buzzed one last time, but not from Deborah. A different name flashed on the screen. Mark. An old friend. Someone I hadn't talked to in years, not because I didn't want to, but because Deborah had made sure of that. She never liked my friends. They're not really your type of people, Franklin, she used to say. She had cut me off from them, slowly, piece by piece, until all I had left was her, and now, she was gone. I answered the call. "Hey, man," I said, my voice lighter than I expected. "Freer." Mark hesitated. "Franklin?" I smiled. "Yeah. It's me." And just like that, I took my first real step forward. The sound of Mark's voice on the other end of the line felt strange at first, like hearing something familiar after years of silence. That we had been close once. Before Deborah slowly pushed him out of my life. Before she made me feel like my friendships were a waste of time, like my world should revolve around her and only her. I had let it happen, but now? Now, I was taking my life back. "Man," Mark laughed lightly, "I wasn't expecting you to call." I exhaled, running a hand through my hair. "Yeah, well, things change." Silence stretched for a second. Then, he said, "It's her, isn't it?" I smirked. He knew. He had always known what kind of woman Deborah was. He had tried to warn me. But I was too blind, too in love with the idea of what I thought our marriage was, to listen. "Yeah," I admitted. "It's over." A pause. Then he let out a breath like he had been waiting years to hear that. "Good." I chuckled. "You're not even gonna pretend to be shocked?" "Nope," he said bluntly. "Not even a little." I sat on the couch, staring at the half-empty house around me. A house that was no longer mine. "So," Mark continued, "what's next?" That was the question, wasn't it? For years, I had structured my entire life around Deborah, what she wanted, what she expected, how she thought our future should look. Now, it was my choice. For the first time in years I leaned back, exhaling slowly. "I don't know," I admitted. "But I'm finally ready to figure it out." Mark let out a short laugh. "Well, it's about damn time." And he was right. It was about time to stop being the guy who sacrificed everything for a woman who had never deserved me, time to stop being the backup plan, time to stop making Deborah the center of my world, when I had never been the center of hers. I wasn't looking for revenge. I wasn't trying to make her regret anything, because the worst thing I could do to Deborah was exactly what I was doing. Walking away, without begging. Without giving her another chance, without letting her keep me as a backup. She thought she had options, she just never thought she'd lose her best one. I smiled, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time, relief. I didn't need to track her anymore. I didn't need to catch her in another lie. I didn't need to look over my shoulder, wondering if I was enough, because I was. I had always been. She just hadn't been smart enough to see it. After I hung up, I picked up my phone one last time, scrolled through my contacts. Stopped on her name. Blocked. No last words. No final conversation. No closure, because I didn't need it. I grabbed my bag, stepped outside, and shut the door behind me for good. And just like that, she was nothing but a memory. I shut the door behind me, the final sound of it closing like a weight lifting off my shoulders. I stood there for a moment, staring at the house that once held every part of my life, our house. Our marriage. Our future. But that was a lie, wasn't it? It had never really been ours. It had been hers. Deborah had always been the one making the decisions, shaping the narrative, keeping me exactly where she wanted me, until today. Because today, I left before she could. I tossed my bag into the car, started the engine, and pulled out of the driveway. No hesitation. No second thoughts. My phone sat on the passenger seat, face down. Quiet, because she couldn't reach me anymore. I had blocked her number, her emails, every way she could try to crawl back into my life. And that silence, it was louder than any screaming match we could have had. Because now, she had nothing to say. She couldn't twist the story. She couldn't manipulate her way out of this. She had spent so much time believing she was untouchable, thinking she could do whatever she wanted and I would still be there, waiting. But now, she was the one left waiting and I wasn't coming back. I didn't have a plan yet. Didn't know exactly where I was going or what came next, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel trapped. No more walking on eggshells. No more second-guessing myself. No more nights lying awake, wondering if the woman sleeping next to me was really mine. She had made her choice and I had made mine. As I drove, the city lights faded behind me, replaced by open roads and endless possibilities. I turned on the radio, rolling the windows down, letting the wind whip through the car because for the first time in years I was free. The highway stretched ahead of me, endless and open. For the first time, I wasn't rushing to be somewhere. I wasn't racing home to a lie. I was just driving, and with every mile, the weight of Deborah, of our so-called marriage, of everything I had been holding onto, it all faded. She had spent years making me feel like I was lucky to have her. Like she was the prize, but in the end, she was the one who lost. And now, I was finally taking back my life. I pulled into a quiet rest stop, stretching my legs. The cool air hit my face, fresh, clean like a reset. I checked my phone out of habit, blocked or not. I expected something from her. Maybe an email. Maybe a call from a different number, but there was nothing, and that told me everything, because Deborah never stayed silent. She wasn't the type to accept defeat. She was the type to plot, and I knew, even though I had cut her off, she wasn't done. I could already picture it, the stories she would tell. Franklin left me out of nowhere. Franklin was always jealous. Franklin just couldn't handle me having male friends, because women like Deborah, they were never the villain in their own story. I leaned against the hood of my car, staring at the sky. It was strange having nowhere to be, no one waiting for me, nothing tying me down. For so long, my life had revolved around making her happy. Now, for the first time, I got to ask myself what made me happy, and the best part, I had all the time in the world to figure it out. I pulled up my contacts, scrolling through names I hadn't seen in years, people Deborah had slowly cut out of my life. Friends I had stopped calling, stopped seeing, not because I wanted to, but because she made it clear she didn't approve of them. Her favorite phrase? "They're not really your kind of people, Franklin." What she meant was they weren't the type to tolerate her games. I found one name. Jake. An old friend. Someone who used to know me before Deborah shaped me into something else. I tapped the call button. It rang twice before he answered. "Hello?" His voice was groggy, confused. I smiled. "Hey, man." A pause. Then, "Franklin?" "Yeah," I said, my voice lighter than I expected. "It's me." And in that moment, I knew I wasn't rebuilding my life. I was finally living it. There was a long pause on the line. Then laughter, not the kind that mocks you, not the kind that makes you feel small. The kind that reminds you of who you used to be. "Man," Jake finally said, still chuckling, "I thought you were dead." I smirked. "Yeah, well, you're not entirely wrong." And in some ways, I had been. Deborah had spent years making sure I was only hers, not in a loving way. Not in a "we're partners against the world" kind of way. In a controlling way. She made sure I spent my free time with her, kept me busy, made me feel guilty for wanting space. And my friends? She had a special tactic for that. At first, she'd say things like, "I love that you have friends," but then, little by little, she'd chip away at them. "That guy? He doesn't really respect you. You know, I heard something weird about him. You should be careful. I just feel like we're outgrowing certain people, don't you?" It wasn't obvious. It was quiet, and before I knew it, I had no one but her. That was by design. But now, she had no control over me. "Glad you called, man," Jake said, his voice steady. "So tell me, what finally woke you up?" I chuckled. "A GPS tracker." Silence. "Then, you put a tracker on your wife?" I smiled. "I put it on a necklace I gave her. Thought it was a nice gift." He let out a low whistle. "Damn." I shook my head. Damn is right. We talked for over an hour, not about Deborah. Not about what had happened, about life, about the things I had forgotten I once cared about. Hobbies, old stories, things I used to love before she made me believe my world should only revolve around her. It hit me then that I had lost myself and Deborah. She hadn't cared because she didn't love me, she loved what I could give her, the stability. The comfort. The security of a man who would always stay, but she had miscalculated. She thought she could cheat and keep me, she thought I would be another one of her options, she thought I would still be waiting, but now, she was the one left behind, and that was her loss. After I hung up with Jake, I sat in my car, staring at the road ahead, for the first time in years. I wasn't thinking about how to make my marriage work, that I wasn't wondering if I was enough, that I wasn't worrying about whether Deborah was telling me the truth, because I didn't care anymore. She had spent years making me feel like I had to prove myself, like I had to be more to keep her interested, like I had to constantly earn her love. But the truth, love isn't something you should have to earn, and if someone makes you feel like you do, then they don't deserve yours. That I turned the key, the engine rumbling to life beneath my hands, and as I pulled onto the highway, away from everything she had built her lies around, I smiled, because for the first time in forever, I was finally living for me. The further I drove, the lighter I felt. For years, Deborah had made me feel like I wasn't enough. Like I had to fight for her love while she weighed her options, but in the end, I was the one who walked away. That I checked my phone at a red light. No messages. No calls. She had finally stopped trying, because she knew I wasn't coming back, knew she had lost the best thing she ever had, and that was the best revenge. That I turned onto the highway, rolling down the window. The night air was crisp, clean, like a fresh start. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking back, that I was only moving forward. The road stretched ahead, open and endless. That I wasn't running away, that I wasn't lost, that I was finally free. Deborah had spent years making me believe that she was the prize, that I had to work harder, try more, be more just to keep her attention, but now, she had nothing left to offer me, and I had everything to gain. As I pulled into a quiet town, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. That I already knew who it was. That I let it ring, then I blocked it, because I didn't need closure. That I didn't need to hear her excuses. She had made her choice, and now I had made mine. That I stepped out of the car, stretching my legs, breathing in the fresh air. A new place. A new start. A new me. No more tracking. No more wondering. No more Deborah, because the best thing I ever did was leave her standing in that driveway, watching me walk away.